much, Dr. Edwards, for such a very, very kind introduction. I tell everyone that I have absolutely the best job in the whole world. No doubt about it. So, this afternoon's topic of discussion, friends, is Amy Marcy Cheney Beach. And the lone chamber opera that she wrote, Cabildo, Opus 149. So, here we go. America at the turn of the last century supported myriad artistic styles and genres. 1932 was an active year for Amy Marcy Cheney Beach, known as the Dean of Women Composers, and the first distinguished American female composer of substantial classical works. Beach was a remarkable woman in the history of late 19th century and early 20th century American music. Her musical gifts earned her great respect and popularity during her lifetime. By the time we reach 1940, only 3 of her 150 opus numbers remained unpublished. This is one. That in and of itself is a remarkable record for any American composer. Additionally, beginning in 1920, Amy Beach clubs began springing up all over the country. Local music teachers came to admire her songs and her piano pieces. Her songs were perhaps the most popular of her works, and she is reputed to have bought a summer home in Cape Cod solely on the royalties of her 3 songs, Opus 44. They're all based on poetry by Robert Browning: Ecstasy, I'll Love But a Day, and The Years at the Spring. The Boston Symphony performed her works, and the publishing firms of Arthur Schmidt and Company, C.C. Burchard and Company, Oliver Ditson and Company faithfully brought out her newest compositions. So they had a real love affair going. Following her husband's death in 1910 and her touring in Europe, when she settled in New York City, 3 New York publishing firms published her music: G. Schirmer, H.W. Gray and Company, and the Composers Press. In fact, Amy Beach enjoyed such favorable circumstances during her life that she never had to teach to earn money. That in itself is quite an accomplishment. The only conflict she admitted to was that of being a performing artist versus a composer. How do you reconcile those two? Since hers was a childless marriage, Amy Beach was free to pursue both performance and composition throughout her life. Beach achieved her lifelong dreams by composing the opera Cabildo, Opus 149, and this occurred in 1932 at the McDowell Colony in New Hampshire. The opera was one of Beach's late works from the period 1931 to 1944, so we're talking the Great Depression in our nation's history. Other works of this period of Amy Beach included a cantata, many songs, anthems, and other choral works, solo piano works, and the largest of the chamber works, her piano trio, Opus 150. Cabildo, one-act chamber opera, is based upon the imprisonment of the pirate Jean Lafitte in the Cabildo in New Orleans, and this was the end product of collaboration between the author Nan Bagby Stevens and Mrs. Beach. Mrs. Stevens was a one-time resident of the McDowell Colony, where Beach was both a semi-permanent resident and a respected matriarch. The work employs Creole folk melodies and jazz elements that had been heretofore absent in Beach's musical output. Beach wanted to write an opera, particularly one based upon an American subject, but the perfect set of circumstances did not culminate until late in her career. This residence at the McDowell Colony offered her an incredible benefit. Daily interaction with other workers in the arts. Among fellows that summer were Batiska Paif, the sculptor who later did a plaster bust of Beach, Catherine Adams, whose poems Beach had set, and the poet Padraig Colum. Beach's colleague, Nan Bagby Stevens, provided the inspiration when she collaborated with Beach at the McDowell Colony that summer by supplying Beach with a play she had written, entitled, big surprise, friends, Cabildo. Beach first met Stevens in 1927, and we think that Stevens likely arranged a recital for Beach at Agnes Scott College in Decatur, Georgia, and this is where Stevens was on faculty. The time involved with Cabildo. Beach and Stevens collaborated on this work for just 1 week. Beach completed composing the opera by the end of the summer. Now, where we are time-wise, we are in the midst of the Great Depression. A couple of other things are happening across the landscape of our country. This is also the time of the Great Migration and the time of the Great Awakening. All three of these elements come into play in this collaborative effort of Beach's, resulting in Cabildo. What comes of this? A retreat from the radical avant-garde in music to a more American style. In particular, one that's based on Anglo-American folk tunes. And two, this likely resulted in a renewed audience for Beach's more conservative as well as her folk-based music. Cabildo, set in New Orleans during the War of 1812, it details the imprisonment of the pirate Jean Lafitte in the Cabildo, the former seat of the Spanish government in New Orleans. Beach incorporated Creole folk melodies supplied by Stevens, which imbue parts of the work with a jazz quality otherwise lacking in her output. She crafted this as a chamber opera, taking place in a single setting. It requires only 7 characters and a chorus. Both Beach and Stevens envisioned a short lead time for the opera's premiere. Yeah, Great Depression. The country's economic condition was not conducive to opera production, and although Beach demonstrated the opera on several occasions, financing a full-blown performance of the work was not possible. In 1940, the height of World War II, the Opera Workshop at the University of Georgia expressed interest in Cabildo and the score, still in manuscript, and it was sent for possible performance. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. The project was shelved, and it was revived in the form of an amateur performance that took place in February 1945 with a cast of faculty and students. Most regrettably, Beach had died December 27, 1944, so just 9 weeks before the performance. And so she was unable to witness the fruits of her artistic labors. It's also believed, too, that at this time, the original score, which calls for piano trio, violin, cello, keyboard, was expanded to include winds, brass, and percussion. But those parts have been misplaced, lost, and so perhaps that will be a future discovery. The first full, complete staging of Cabildo didn't occur until May 1995 at Lincoln Center in New York under the direction of Ransom Wilson. It was telecast on PBS's Great Performances and supported by recording. That's actually the recording that you'll hear some excerpts from this afternoon. The Chamber Opera had its Texas premiere in Houston in September 2007 by Opera Vista. This led to a New Orleans premiere in the actual Cabildo in April of 2009. Beach, ably assisted by Nan Bagby Stevens, crafted this opera in a very symmetrical, perfectly balanced story within a story, reminiscent of works such as Richard Strauss's Ariadne of Naxos, reflecting both present and past events. The cast consists of a barker or a narrator, so this is a throwback to old tradition, tourists, which serve also as mixed chorus, two additional tourists who happen to be newlyweds, Tom and Mary. Tom's a tenor, Mary's a mezzo. Pierre, okay, we need a pirate, cast as a baritone, a jailer as a bass, Dominique Yu, who is Pierre Lafitte's lieutenant, and Lady Valerie, who is Pierre's love interest, cast as a soprano. Very thin instrumental accompaniment, and now our story. The opera opens in the present with a guided tour of the Cabildo. The tour guide tells a group of tourists as they stand in the very cell where Pierre Lafitte had been imprisoned the story of his incarceration and mysterious escape. The barker recounts the fictional love story of Pierre and Valerie. They met at the governor's ball in New Orleans and fell madly in love. As a token of their love, Valerie gave Pierre her bracelet. She was soon ordered back to France by her father, who had found a much more suitable spouse for his aristocratic daughter. Her ship, Lafitte's frigate, the Falcon, was attacked by some of Lafitte's men turned traitor. The Falcon sank, Valerie drowned. Tragedy. Mary's romantic imagination is captured by the barker story of Pierre and Valerie. What newlywed wouldn't be? Think about that. As other tourists and then Tom leave the cell to see the rest of the Cabildo, she remains behind, falls asleep, and dreams of an explanation of Pierre's escape from the Cabildo. In the dream scene that follows, Dominique Yu visits Pierre in prison. Pierre asks Dominique repeatedly for news, and finally, but reluctantly, he tells Pierre that the ship sank and Lady Valerie is drowned. The governor, who had seized the bracelet as a means of framing Pierre, accused the pirate of stealing it and ordered the sinking to cover the theft. He sentenced Pierre to be executed. As Dominique leaves the cell, he slips Pierre the bracelet that he has surreptitiously taken from the governor's desk. Pierre, left alone, laments Valerie's death and sings of his love for her. Soon, the ghost of Lady Valerie appears to comfort him. She recounts the drowning, and Pierre vows that he will pay for her death with his own. Valerie argues against this, urging him to accept General Andrew Jackson's offer of clemency in return for fighting the British. They declare their love in a passionate and extended duet, the climax of the opera. Valerie convinces Pierre to escape and fight with General Jackson. Before disappearing, she unlocks the cell door through which he escapes. The brief final scene returns to the present. Mary awakens from her dream, assures Tom that it really wasn't a dream, it was real, and the opera ends as the two celebrate the power of love, their own and that of Pierre and Valerie. Now, the libretto contains a couple of flaws or weaknesses. First, we hear the story twice, in the opening scene and again in the dream scene, in which the story is enacted and the dramatic crux of the opera. Second, because the action is presented in the dream sequence, we're asked as listeners, as viewers, to suspend our views, our judgments, our ideas about this opera, not on one but two levels of disbelief. Beach faced with a new genre and a fanciful tale settled on a combination of folk songs for local color, one of her own songs to provide, if you will, some emotional weight, and a style that ranged from folk idioms to expressionism, especially in her use of distorted declamation. Wagnerian influence is apparent in her use of leitmotifs, scene complexes, and continuous recitative. The compositional challenge in the opera was to mediate between the harmonically simple black Creole melodies she quoted and her highly expressive post-romantic compositional style. In the prologue, Beach seamlessly combines her own folk-like melodies with the quotations from the Creole song Mouché Mesero, harmonizing both with primary chords and an occasional chromatic inflection. Soon after, the barker enters with the tourists. Chromaticism and dissonance escalate, especially in the recitatives as the story becomes more dramatic.
Ladies and gentlemen, this way, this way. Righto. Ladies and gentlemen, now you are standing in the courtyard of the Cabildo. The Spanish governor's palace, later the famous prison, hence the name Cabildo. Notorious pirate, yeah, feet. Yes, sirree. Read your guidebooks.
Similar distortions are heard in music derived from Creole folk melodies. Beach quotes them at appropriate moments, as instrumental background to the narrator, as sung recitative, as choral interjections, occasionally as arioso, and as recurring motives. For example, Belle Léotte is heard in the accompaniment when Pierre the pirate is mentioned, as distinct from Pierre in Hold by Love. In translation, the folk song's text states, "I have sailed along the shore, there is none like my Belle Léotte." At this point, the chorus picks up the rhythm, but not the melody of Belle Léotte. A few measures later, the melody is heard, but distorted by chromatic intervals and dissonant harmonizations. In the dream sequence, when the jailer brings Dominique to see Pierre, Mouché Mesero is again heard in its original words, mocking the governor. And the quote is, "Who sits in his old office like a bullfrog in a pail of water?" Close quote. The jailer, after receiving a bribe from Pierre's lieutenant, sings, quote, "When I was on a highway," a translation of the Creole song "Quand mot te donne grand chemin," or vision. And this is about a beggar who steals a pinch of snuff, a bandana, and a cognac sweet. This is the only direct and unchanged quotation of a folk song in the opera. Belliot is again invoked in the dream scene, but in a distorted version as Pierre blames himself for Valerie's drowning. There are several set pieces in the opera in addition to the jailers, some of them folk-based, some original. Caroline, for example, provides the melody for the only set piece for mixed chorus. An original duet for Tom and Mary that is reminiscent of a Gilbert and Sullivan patter song closes the first scene as they sing, "Together, together, no matter what the weather." This effect is ironic. No sooner do they finish the duet than they part. Mary to remain in Pierre's cell, and Tom to see Cabildo's model ship exhibit. Initial presentation of fragments of these folk songs are usually in folk style, but Beech's gift for thematic transformation develops and distorts them harmonically with the introduction of tritones and other distinct intervals, chromaticism, ambiguous tonality, and modulation to remote keys. This is how she reconciles the differences between borrowed folk melody and original music. Not all the leitmotifs are from folk songs. The first few notes of Beech's song, "When Soul is Joined to Soul," Opus 62, are played whenever Valerie's name is mentioned, often in a remote key, as if simultaneously invoking her image and her distance. A leitmotif original to the opera, a series of rising three-note phrases, serves as the music for Pierre's escape. Beech employs this figure to segue into a heroic alla marcia when the narrative describes Pierre's decision to join the fight to save New Orleans. The phrase is repeated several times later when a patriotic defense of New Orleans is mentioned. These disparate motives enable Pierre to become a three-dimensional character to the audience. A pirate, when folk songs are used, a, quote, very prince of a pirate, ennobled by his love for Valerie, when art music is heard, and as the hero and defender of New Orleans when the martial music is introduced. The end of that little example, those soaring lines and the ecstatic quality provide the climax of the dream sequence of the opera as a whole. Now, what you've heard, Beach's style is eclectic. You hear aspects of Brahms, Wagner, MacDowell. Typical of the late Romantic period, her larger works exhibit lush chromaticism, many altered chords, broadly spun out melodies, involved development of themes and complex harmonies. Her songs, now considered sentimental, rely on a natural gift for melody, but with piano accompaniments rarely simplified. Thus, Beach's output must be viewed as an outgrowth of 19th century Romantic music and not 20th century modernism. She was a member of the Second New England School, which included Horatio Parker, George Chadwick, Edward MacDowell, and Arthur Foote, which generally avoided new compositional trends as impressionism or atonality. Her Puccini-like melodies display the influence of Liszt and the German school of Romanticism. As such, Beach represents the end of Romanticism in the United States. Beach's characteristically pianistic textures and figuration are simply conveyed to other instruments and genres. The songs do not present memorable tunes, even though they were quite popular. This is illustrative that her compositional style is inseparable from her mechanical skills at the piano. According to Beach, there are three sides to the art of composition. First is the emotional, or that which reflects inner feelings and produces the desire to communicate. The second is the intellectual, or the understanding of musical form. And the third is spiritual, involving both the listener and the creator. The folk music of the Americas, such as Indian and Negro tunes, is evidenced in some of Beach's music as well as in others of the New England school. Folklore held a central place in Beach's music, and some of her compositions incorporate genuine folk melodies, but not the extreme of nationalism. Beach herself stated, quote, "Personally, I do not think that Indian and Negro melodies will play a very great role in the future development of American composition." Instead, Beach used folk melodies to add exotic color and novelty to her musical romanticism. The idiosyncrasies of the folk theme she used did not prescribe the form of her works. Rather, the characteristics peculiar to those folk themes were secondary consideration. There are also many examples of Beach's use of Scotch or Irish folk tunes. It cannot be presumed, though, that she intentionally employed the folk music idiom in the same way as Bartok, for example, with his assimilation of primitive rhythms and pentatonic scales. Beach also did not attempt to combine nationalistic elements in her music as did Liszt, Grieg, or Smetana. She was influenced by many composers, including Brahms, Rachmaninoff, Liszt, and MacDowell. A chronological study of her works does not easily divide into stylistic periods. Instead, pattern is revealed more in formal structures and increased focus on thematic development that occurs in her later works. Her stylistic footprint includes trills, chromatic scales, and octave figurations. Her melodic and harmonic movement is often chromatic, but the compositional device is the chromatic scale itself. It might function as cadenza, or used to increase harmonic ambiguity of a passage. In order to produce orchestral effects within a small chamber ensemble, as she did here with piano trio, Beach often uses scalar or arpeggiated passages in single or double octaves. These passages, too, can serve a rhythmic function, underlying the thematic nature of the line. Melodic style in Beach's songs has consistently become disjointed, with frequent change of direction, extremely chromatic, and, without its harmonization, totally ambiguous. In addition to a fondness for fourths and sevenths in the vocal melodies, several other differences occur in the songs. Melodies rarely begin on the downbeat, while non-consonant intervals are present in all genres. They are more predominant in the songs. The octave leap is frequently found in the songs and on the final note of the phrase or the final note of the song. By contrast, many of her instrumental themes are more lyrical, more conjunct, and more consonant in their choice of intervals. In Cabildo, the melodies are likewise more tonally related. Harmonic analysis of Beach's work reveals extreme chromaticism, rapidly changing tonal centers, and remote harmonies. She's not really interested in strong dissonance, but works to avoid harmonic predictability, and she often uses diminished chord or dominant seventh chord or sequence of both types as pivot for changing keys. Cadences are often avoided, and the key change may be sudden or may follow a period of silence. We heard a couple examples of those this afternoon. The rhythmic structures aren't particularly complex. Tempo changes within a single work or movement are important means of contrast. Common devices include cross-rhythmic, uneven groupings of notes, syncopation, repeated rhythmic motives, and the triplet figure. The use of cross rhythms is one way in which she implies rhythmic freedom. 2-against-3 pattern is the most common, and that can be observed between voice and piano, between instruments, and between registers in the piano parts. The use of uneven note groupings, particularly septuplets, often occurs in melodic lines, particularly cadenza-like passages. Beach makes extensive use of syncopation And two, if you think about the time when this was written, the 1930s, this is the height of the Jazz Age, when we are making that transition from New Orleans-style Dixieland to Chicago style. And so, then, two, writers at the time, particularly Adrienne Magazine, was writing about what the sin in syncopation. So Amy Beach as, well, a forward-thinking woman for the time, very much so. Amy Beach was an eclectic romantic composer, not the originator of progressive modern compositional in her own right. She demonstrated musical integrity and should be valued for her contribution to American music culture. Amy Beach left two legacies. In her will, she left a substantial gift to the McDowell colony in the form of royalties from publishers and performance fees from ASCAP and other agencies. Her public legacy is both her life and her music, which are inseparable. She redefined the role of women in music by pursuing technical mastery despite the denial of advanced training and with complete focus typical of the gifted. Beach's compositions, though steeped in the tradition of late Romanticism, carry the mark of her individuality through her use of harmonic vocabulary, her experimental tonal language, and the lyricism of her melodies. She not only successfully overcame the gender issue, but also was accepted by colleagues in this country and earned an international reputation as composer, pianist, and contributor to American Romantic chamber music, of which Cabildo is but one example. Thank you.
There's time for some questions and comments if you wish. Questions, comments? Yes?
You said this wasn't published at the time. Is it published now? And what was to go along with that, what was the motivation for performing it at Cabildo in 2009?
Okay. The score still only exists in manuscript. It is housed in the special collection at New Missouri, Kansas City. They were very kind and gracious to me in supplying me with a PDF of the manuscript, all 200 and some pages of it. The impetus for the revival of the works had to do with centennial anniversary of the Cabildo. That was how it came about. It's like, oh, anniversary? Oh, there's this little chamber opera. How wonderful! And so that's how it came into being. Other questions?